Alaka, who was in the founding team for WSCIJ when it started in 2005. She was WSCIJ's pioneer coordinator, and she's the current executive director and CEO of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. Please join me in welcoming her to set the tone for this lecture.
Good day, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Adiola Kola, standing in for Ms. Mutarayo Alaka. We are glad that you are here, and we appreciate all the panelists taking out this time to join this conversation. Again, my name is Adiola Adekola, the Senior Program Officer of the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. This year, we're excited that we are able to have this conversation that is going to highlight the importance of data in national development and the role the media plays intersecting the conversation. And at the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism, we are very deliberate and we are very intentional about how we discuss national issues. So this is the 12th year we are holding this lecture, and we have had conversations intersecting different national issues, from anti-corruption to taxation, to education, to electricity, majorly for us to set the tone for policymakers and every other stakeholders in the role that they have to play to critically bring to the fore matters of national importance. This year, and by implication, what has happened in the past 4 or 5 months about the coronavirus pandemic, it has highlighted the role again that data has to play in national planning, in budget planning, in engaging citizens, and making sure that all stakeholders come to the table to present their roles or to play their roles effectively. Therefore, we're excited that every of the panelists are here with us. We thank all the panelists for taking out the time to be part of the conversation this morning. And in conclusion, we are very much excited that this conversation is holding today. We wish our grand patron, Professor Wole Soyinka, Africa's first Nobel Laureate Prize winner in literature, it's a wonderful 86th birthday. This is the 11th time the lecture is holding on his birthday. We thank all our attendees who have taken out the time to be part of this conversation today. And we hope that the conversation on data, media, and national development will go a long way in setting the tone for how we should do things properly and how data can help us in policy making. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adeolu, for those opening remarks. I now call on Dr. Kole Shatima, a doctor of political science, former lecturer, and the current director for the Africa Office of the MacArthur Foundation, to give his remarks on behalf of the MacArthur Foundation. As I mentioned earlier, the MacArthur Foundation is supporting this year's event, and WSCIJ is hosting this year's event courtesy of the foundation. Everyone, I present to you Dr. Kole Shatima.
Sorry about my mic. Okay. I was just saying that, I was thanking Chioma for the opportunity and for the team at the Soyinka Center for giving the foundation this privilege of supporting this event. I believe this is our 4th or 5th or 6th years of support for this lecture. It's a lecture that we always look forward to. For me, I think that I look forward to it for a number of reasons. Primarily because I have stopped encouraging people to be organizing memorials because there's a tendency that in Nigeria we always remember people when they're dead. But I think that this is one event that I think has turned the corner to celebrate people who are alive. And so we are very excited to be part of this celebration of Professor Soyinka. Professor Soyinka is someone I think that all of us know him very well, and whatever we can do in order to continue his legacy, the work that he has been doing, I think it is worth remembering this occasion. But at the same time, I think I like this event because also I think it's an opportunity also to challenge younger generation of Nigerians to be thinking of starting to take leadership role in this country as well. I talked to a number of people, and whenever I talk to them, they will say, oh, but I haven't heard what Professor Soyinka said about this. And I always remind them that they should not be outsourcing their responsibilities for Professor Soyinka. At the age of 80 plus, I think we should give him some peace. And I think that, we don't have to wait for him to say something before we should take responsibilities for our country as well. The next comment I just want to make is that I hope the Soyinka Center also will really take seriously some of the documentation around Soyinka himself. So recently I was looking at some newspaper article talking about some of the films that have been produced or some of the books of Soyinka that have been now been turned to films. And I was saying, okay, but if I want to watch these films, where can I get those films? And I don't know whether the Soyinka Center has deliberately make an effort to put this collection together, but I think I would like to encourage the Soyinka Center to think about bringing together all these films to some form so that people can always have access to them and look at them and read them and other things. The last comment I just want to make is around the theme itself, which is around data, the media and national development. We at the foundation are very passionate, very committed, and very concerned about the relationship about those three variables. Many of you have read several books or several kinds of uncomplimentary titles about our country as, either planning to fail or unplanned development or all kinds of things people talk about in terms of the data situation of our country and how data informs policy or doesn't inform policy and other things. And I think that certainly since Dr. Kale came into National Bureau for Statistics, I think certainly we have seen significant improvement in terms of the quality of our data in the country, for which I think we all thank him for that. But I think that this is an area that I think that we also need to work very hard and to make sure that we get the data that we need in order to inform actually the work of the media itself, but also in terms of national development. Because sometimes, I mean, Sean was at Bloomberg, but Bloomberg maybe is a media organization, but probably it makes most of its money through data and what it sells to the public and what it sells to other people more than other thing else. So I think that, if we also think about our media houses as sources of data themselves, but if those data have to be consciously collected, those data have to be professionally collected, I believe that that is one of the probably major areas of information, but also that of revenue that I think our media houses may be able to tap in and to make them more sustainable rather than waiting on only one set of source of income that probably most of them are relying upon. And as in the foundation, as I said, we support several of the media organizations. The last count, I think we are supporting like 20 or so organizations that are working around these issues because we truly believe that the media is critical, very important to the work that we do in our country. Ours is one of the few countries that I think has raised the status of the media to be an institution of integrity in our country, and therefore I think whatever support that we can give to the media to have an independent media that holds government accountable, I think that is a critical role that organizations like ours can play. And then, try to see also how data itself can also inform national development. So I'm happy that, people like Sheon and recently Joshua Olufemi of Data Pite have been really paying attention to the question of data and how data can be used for in various ways and other things. And I think that, yes, there are challenges of data in this country of unavailability, but I think that also that many of us also are not paying attention to even the existing data that in our system. So probably, paying attention to what is already existing might also give us lots of information. So if you take, for example, the demographic and health survey that the country produces, you hardly really see anybody doing an analysis or those data that comes out, except those who are in health sector, who will look at maternal mortality rate and child mortality and other things. But in terms of just analyzing them, what does it mean? What does it mean in terms of policy and other things? So the last point I want to do is also to throw another challenge. So I've been thinking that if our country is going to be the third or the fourth largest country in the world in the next 30 years or so. So I'm just thinking, okay, who can help us to produce a clock or a counter that will match the population growth in our country with the number of toilets that we need every second as we march towards 2050, the number of teachers that we need as we march towards 2050, the number of toilets, the number of nurses, the number of classrooms, the number of police, the number of military that we need. Because I think that our policymakers, my sense is that people, we are just sleeping towards something. And I'm just thinking, okay, how can we really wake them up from this sleepwalking and to make the point that, look, in the next 30 years or so, the number of toilets we need is 10. I mean, how many billions of toilets do we need? How many nurses do we need? How many medical doctors? And I'm just, so my own imagination is that, okay, you put that one and you give it as a gift to the president. And then, and I hope the president, whoever the president is conscientious to put it in their room, on their office, so that we can see how the population growth is being matched by how many toilets do we need, how many classrooms do we need, how many teachers do we need, how many medical doctors do we need, and maybe put someone, because I'm in Abuja, the Unity Park, so that I think that people then begin to see what are the consequences of our actions and what does it mean and what does leadership mean in this kind of situation. And you can have it in every state. You can have it in Lagos as well. So for me, it's something that I've been thinking, and so I want to throw this challenge. I think there are one or two people who have accepted that challenge as well. I think that we need our leadership to know that we are working towards an issue, a disaster actually, and that unless we wake up and begin to take our responsibilities or problem, just basic things, toilet, just think of just toilet or water points or whatever that we need in order in that march in that direction. I think that is something that I have always thought about, and I hope that we can work towards and make this happen. Okay, so let me stop at this point. As Shioma said, I am a very old teacher, and there's a tendency for teachers just to talk and talk and talk, and so it's better I stop here. Thank you very much, Shioma.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you so much. There are already so many comments in the chat room talking about liking the ideas that you are sharing, about the real visual dashboard of what we need versus what we have. And I see that some people are already taking up the challenge, just like you said. And I'm sure that this is the, I'm sure that conversations will go on from here. But this is the kind of thing that the lecture was intended for, to throw up these issues, but also to not just mention the issues, but open paths for solutions, so that we don't just come like every other lecture or like every other event and throw up problems, but they're also concrete solutions that people can take forward. We're moving on very quickly, and here's how we're going to proceed with the panel discussion for today. Each of the speakers have the first 10 minutes to share their opening thoughts on the lecture. Afterwards, I will talk them through the questions that they're going to be responding to for another 20 minutes, and then we will field questions from participants, from you, who are watching, who are listening, and then we will wrap up for the day. We're going to be starting first with Dr. Oluwa Yemisi Alaba, who's a senior lecturer at the Statistics Department, University of Ibadan. She'll start teaching us some theoretical frameworks on statistics and the applicability in Nigeria. Dr. Oluwa Yemisi, over to you, ma. Please unmute your mic.
Good evening, afternoon, and morning to my distinguished audience wherever you are. It's a mark of honor to be part of this event to mark the birthday of a revered legend, a prolific writer, and the first African Nobel laureate in literature, Professor Wole Soyinka. My interest this morning borders on the theories and realities that support credible and accessible data and the statistical framework for sustainable development. That is, what should constitute an ideal, effective statistical system to enhance sustainable development in Nigeria. The importance of statistical data in national policies cannot be trivialized when decisions are to be made maybe at the grassroots or national level. Data are important for assessment, situation analysis, prediction, knowledge creation, for planning and policy making. Data are crude information, but become information when they are relevant to the problem at hand. For example, when we are talking about education, the ratio of teachers to pupils is relevant. The information then becomes facts when data can support it. Facts are what the data reveal and become knowledge when used in the successful completion of a decision process. Because of the growing demand for data globally, there is a need for a functional statistical system. The National Statistical Office is saddled with the responsibility of coordination to avoid unnecessary and costly duplications and produce quality and consistent official statistics in a country. The system collects data from censuses, surveys, administrative data, and draws them together to form a picture of the country's economic, social, and environmental situations. There are 4 components in the National Statistical System. We have the first one, the data producers, and this includes departments of planning, research, and in state ministries and parastatals, National and State Bureau of Statistics, local government area statistics units, and Ministry of Departments and agencies. The role of data producers is to ensure flow of high quality and accessible statistical data over an extended range of subject matter in a timely manner. The data users, they set data priorities on the why, when, and how for data producers. The normal slogan that no customers, no business. Policymakers, researchers, students, media, the general public, everybody is a data user. We all demand and utilize data. The third component, they are the data suppliers, and this includes all households, individuals, and business organizations. They cooperate with data collectors and agencies to give accurate data because without their input, the true picture of a nation will be masked. The last but not the least is the research and training institutions such as the Department of Statistics at universities, where I'm coming from, and polytechnics. They engage in the capacity building of the data producers. They develop and promote appropriate data collection, new methodologies and interpretation for the system to work and be dynamic. The National Statistical Office now collaborates with the 4 components for an effective system. When we talk of an effective statistical system, which is responsive to data in a timely manner, provide good quality statistics, which is readily accessible by a range of users, then that system must be characterized by all those listed. The first is the legal framework. Statistical legislation is a fundamental prerequisite to protect the confidentiality and assurance of impartiality and objectivity of official statistics. Then it must be guided by the vision and mission statement. And this vision and mission statement should address questions such as, what do we want the national statistical system to become like? Maybe in 10 years from now. That is the vision. What is our business or purpose for existence? That is the mission. And this statement should motivate activities in the national statistical system. Then there must be smart strategic goals. That is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goals, and a comprehensive and unified framework for assessing and meeting users' needs. Then the national statistical system should be user or demand focused and driven to meet both national information needs for monitoring national development, such as when we are talking about poverty reduction. The national statistical system should also be robust and dynamic. That is, it should be able to address the ever-changing needs of the users and adopt emerging issues such as gender issues, corruption, child abuse, and the emerging COVID-19 pandemic. On leadership, leadership with the technical statistical expertise and organizational system and capability to perform its role, that advocates the use of statistics and the importance of national statistical system to the development of the country. For data quality, the International Monetary Fund identified 5 main dimensions to data quality. These include integrity. Data must be transparent and follow ethical standards. Methodological soundness. Data should follow international standards, guidelines, and best practices. And data should be accurate and reliable. Serviceability. Data are produced and disseminated in a timely fashion with an appropriate periodicity. Then it should be accessible to users through the media. On coordination, to avoid unnecessary duplication of efforts leading to inconsistent data and waste of resources, there is a need for coordination of the national statistical system to produce reliable and high-quality data. Then there should be coordination of the 774 local governments and all ministries, departments, and agencies at the 36 states of the Federation by the State Bureau of Statistics. Then the 36 States Bureau of Statistics and the federal ministry departments and agencies are now coordinated by the National Bureau of Statistics. Then the National Bureau of Statistics makes data available for all users as a one-stop shop for official statistics in Nigeria. Distinguished audience, my sermon is to have a sustainable statistical framework in Nigeria. Everybody is a key player in the quality of data disseminated in the country. A well-linked statistical system is an important tool for sustainable development in Nigeria. And to have a well-linked statistical system, there is a need for adequate funding of our National Statistical Office. And a well-funded National Statistical Office should display all statistical data online for effective and sustainable collaboration among all stakeholders. Robert Kalu said, and I quote, "When we have all data online, it will be great for humanity. It is a prerequisite to solving many problems that humankind faces." On this note, I want to wish the celebrants of today happy 86th birthday, Professor Akinwande Oluwole Babatunde Soyinka. Happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you very much for that riveting presentation. And thank you for also teaching some of us all the names of Professor Wole Soyinka. Some of us just know W and S, but when my parents call me with all my names, I have either done something very good or have done something very bad. So thank you for teaching us all of those names. There are a lot of questions in the chat room. The people are leaving comments. There are a lot of people applauding your presentation. I have a specific question on the integrity of data, but we're going to come back to that once everybody has finished with their presentations. We move on now to hear Dr. Yemi Kale, Statistician General of the Federation and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics, as he gives us his opening thoughts, speaking to the state of data in the country, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. Over to you, Dr. Kale. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, everybody. And let me start by joining other panelists and guests in wishing Professor Wole Soyinka a happy 86th birthday and praying for his good health. And also thanking him for his selfless service to our country. I also want to thank the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism for inviting me to be part of such an important theme, data, media, and national development. As we can imagine, this is such a broad theme. So I have been asked to speak on the current data production landscape, strengths, challenges, and opportunities. And if time permits, I would also touch on the role and use of data by the media as an important stakeholder in our quest for national development. That being said, I believe the link between data and national development is very clear. From providing information and evidence to dictate policy programs and projects, to monitoring the efficacy of those policies, projects, and programs in meeting the country's development objectives. At the same time, the role of the media in using the data produced to inform the public about the performance of its government in meeting those development objectives is also very, very clear. So I will not really go into too much details about that link. With respect to the current landscape, I think there has been a significant increase in the demand and supply of data in the country, in its accuracy, in its speed, in the efficiency of the data, in the accuracy of the data, even in the reliability of the data, and even in dissemination and the use of data in Nigeria. Yes, it can improve, but there's been a significant increase in all those parameters over the last few years. The first speaker mentioned that there's a lot of data out there, but he's observed that it's either not noticed by users or it's not properly analyzed or read. And this is why the National Bureau of Statistics, we moved from hard copies, producing hard copies of data to soft copy, just to make sure data can be received by as many people as possible. In the past, we produced maybe 200 copies of a 300, 400 page document, which cannot go very far. Now we improved our website and put a lot of data in there. Now we are getting millions of downloads of our reports. So data is getting to as many people as possible. We also try to fix dissemination by using, for example, infographics. So it makes it easier for data users to study the data, analyze it a lot faster than if they had to sift through 300-400 pages of tables. So these are some of the things that we are doing to improve the ease in which data users can access data as well as interpret and analyze data as fast as possible. But with respect to the current landscape, I think we can understand the current layout for data production in Nigeria using the analogy of demand and supply. For those of you that are economists. Within the last decade, like I said, we have seen significant increases in the demand for data, particularly from the public and the media in Nigeria. By this, I mean the increasingly loud, very loud demand for public accountability on the part of the citizens. For example, we have a data release calendar that we publish at the beginning of the year. And nowadays, if we miss that deadline for a few hours, sometimes the public starts to shout, where's the data, where's the data? So you can see there has been this significant increase in ensuring that data is produced. The public is very eager to see the performance of government and to hold their government accountable. There is also demand from businesses seeking to invest in Nigeria, whether external businesses or even domestic businesses that want to understand the Nigeria market. There's a huge demand in government seeking to identify areas of policy intervention and to some extent, even international development partners, NGOs, who want to intervene in development projects in Nigeria or want to just monitor and evaluate various things in Nigeria, also demanding huge data. This has forced government to pay a lot more attention to data production. This is probably why our data budget has increased significantly over the years. It's not as much as we want it to be, but it has increased significantly in response to this huge demand for data. At the same time as the increase in demand for data, we are also forced to also increase the accuracy, the speed, update methodologies, and ensure that we are using the most updated methodologies used internationally. So it also put pressure on the national statistical system to ensure that it is able to meet that increase in the demand for data in the country. I believe the results, it has also increased a lot of collaboration between the data producers. So we have a lot of, you'll find that we're doing a lot of work. MBS as the apex body for and the coordinator of the statistical system by law is doing a lot of work with state statistical offices, doing a lot of work with the statistic units of the ministries, department agencies, doing a lot of work with, you will see a lot of collaboration between ourselves and the World Bank and the UN and so on. So that's increased a lot of work between ourselves and all these data producers as well as suppliers. And I believe the results of such constant interaction between these forces of demand and supply, as I described them, of data has helped lead to an environment with data availability, and its role in advancing issues of national importance has become well established in Nigeria. There's a lot of room for improvement, both in demand and the use of data, but it is definitely has increased significantly in the last 5 to 10 years. Even the COVID-19 response was based strictly on data, both in terms of understanding the problem as well as understanding the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19. There was a lot of emphasis on data. So we have a situation where both the public and government are realizing that data is, without data, you really cannot solve any problem in Nigeria. You need data to understand the unemployment, to solve the unemployment problem. You have to know how many people are unemployed. You have to know how many, what states they are. You have to know what their skills or qualifications are, whether they are male or female, and all sorts of such data before you can develop policies and programs to actually solve those problems. Without that, you will just be dancing in the dark and taking, guesswork. What data does is to help you understand the problem so that your policies are targeted to solving that particular problem. And it's when you do that, that you have a greater opportunity to solve that particular problem. For me, the key strengths of this emerging landscape is the ability of the statistical system to continuously innovate, to produce, for example, new kinds of data. I always believe that data should be evidence-based, especially when you have a statistical system that doesn't have that much money. You have to ensure that whatever data you are producing is what is required by the users. We don't want to produce data that nobody is interested in. So you want to produce data that the data that is likely demanded by the Nigerian public. So it ensures that the data is used actually for national development, rather than just producing data for the sake of it. So you have new data being produced, new data sources, you have new data types, new tools, new methodologies that keep evolving, statistical methodologies that keep evolving every time, new approaches to collecting data, new norms, new ways of applying data insights, and even new data institutions, all of which tend to improve the quality of decision making, and that's actually the objective of data. Here, I want to give, I can give an example of a challenge I had with poverty, where in particular, I've given this example several times, where a state governor was so sure that he was improving the poverty situation in the state. He had opened up so many roads, new roads, and he expected that the poverty numbers would drop in the state. But when we published the figures, we found that the poverty rate had actually increased in the state, and he couldn't understand it. So he brought me to the state and showed me all the new roads and wanted to understand why is poverty going down in the state when he has done opened so many roads and so on. And we showed him the poverty map, and we showed that he was opening roads in the places where the majority of the poor in the state were not. So he was targeting, he was adopting the right policy, but adopting the wrong data. So because of that, the policy that was good was ineffective in the state. In terms of challenges, I would say that challenges currently exist, and I would say that the misuse and abuse of statistics, often to achieve short-term political advantage, is a constant challenge that needs to be reined in. At the National Bureau of Statistics, we have resisted any form of political interference, but it doesn't stop those that want to use it for political, for politics to interpret the data in any way they want to and give it a different narrative. So we have a lot of such challenges. Even when the data is accurate, if it's given the wrong narrative, it might inform the wrong policy, and that might not help in terms of develop our national development goals. I've often said that there is no gain running down the statistics office simply because you are in oppositional party today. People always joke and say, I have no permanent friends. It depends on how the data is. I might be the friend of government and the enemy of the opposition. And the next time that the data is negative, the reverse is the case. I can become the friend of government if the data is positive, and an enemy of the opposition. And when the data is negative, the reverse becomes the case. So we have to get to a situation where data is taken as it is, and it is used by policymakers to solve problems rather than attacking the data. It's not a menu where you select, politicians select the data, the same data from MBS that they like. I've been in presentations where a governor or a minister will agree with the data relating to his state on page 2 of a document, and on page 5 of the same document, he will tell you how no, he does it. This one is not correct, even though the document was produced by the same National Bureau of Statistics. So we have to stop that situation where we pick what data suits us and we drop all the other ones. The objective of data is to help policymakers take the right decisions. And what they should do when data is not in their liking is for them to understand the data and then try and fix the problem in line with whatever the data is telling them. There's also a second challenge which has to do with the budgetary provisions for statistics in Nigeria. Nigeria has one of the smallest statistical budgets in the continent, not to mention the world. I think this needs to improve. The increase in the budgetary allocation for statistics would improve the amount of data available for national development. And I think thirdly, I would say it's also the attitude of the data suppliers, the individuals, the households, the businesses are sometimes very reluctant in releasing information, maybe because they are very worried about what the information is going to be used for, whether it's going to be used against them. So you still have those challenges where people are a bit reluctant to give data, but this has definitely increased significantly over the years. With respect to the opportunities, and I want to conclude here, I want to highlight opportunities and roles for the media to use data to support national development. Firstly, the widespread use of mobile devices presents one opportunity to broaden the coverage and size of any data collection program. At the MBS, we moved from using paper questionnaires to using electronic devices, using satellite imagery to actually draw samples, because you know that people migrate, there's a lot of migration in Nigeria. So sometimes if you have a paper-based sample system, our staff will get to a particular area expecting 1,000 people and find that there's nobody there, or the number has dropped to 10, and the accuracy of your sampling technique is extremely important in determining the accuracy of the data that comes out of it. So we use computer-based devices, computer-assisted personal interview devices rather than paper questionnaires. They are a lot more effective, they are faster, they are GPS enabled. So if one of the staff chooses to go and make up data under the mango tree, he can't do that any longer because the GPS details will show him, will show us that he did not go to where he was meant to go. It's also faster because once the data is collected, online real time, it is sent straight to our database in Abuja as the survey is going on. So we can see, I actually can see the data as it's been produced on the field. I can actually, at my desk, click on a particular enumerator's device and see the data he has collected that day. It makes it easier because when the survey is going on, we have our data processors that are actually monitoring the data being received from the field as it is going on. It's easy, and once they notice any data that looks strange, they can immediately tell the enumerator to go and recheck it right there and then, as opposed to paper, which you cannot do anything about until the survey has been completed. I think these improvements in data production are particularly relevant, for example, for things like opinion polls on major public issues. Oh, I forgot to add that we also have a call center now at NBS. It enables us to get very quick information from the public. So we partner with the telecoms communications and we draw our samples from this telecoms communications, and then we call people and ask them very quick information. You can't use phone surveys for large surveys. You can only use it for very quick 1-2 page information where you need to get information very, very quickly. That's what we used, for example, the baseline socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19 on the Nigerian public. Like I said, these kinds of improvement in technology in the Nigerian statistical system presents an opportunity for large-scale interventions. For example, mobile phone location data could aid in contact tracing during a pandemic and in identifying and supporting vulnerable households with cash transfers, for example. Another opportunity is the increasing effort to cultivate a culture of fact-checking among media houses. Media platforms, for example, such as Africa Check, Dubois, Budget, and so on, continue to play an important role in ensuring that trusted data sources are consulted and the public is not misinformed. Furthermore, one must note the emergence of new data champions, such as your center, that is contributing to national development through public engagement and discourse and helping to draw attention to these issues. I think finally, on our part at NBS, I am pleased to say that even though we still have a lot of work to do, we are definitely stepping up our engagement with the media by deepening the analytical and storytelling capacity of journalists. I've mentioned how we've tried to make understanding data easier, how we have tried to ensure that rather than making journalists go through 300-400 pages of tables, we have tried to make it easier with infographics and so on, with executive summaries, so that they don't miss the main points of the entire study. We're doing the same thing for policymakers. A lot of these policymakers, ministers don't have time to look at 300-page document, but when we make it a quick executive summary of the main points with infographics so they can graph the main points very quickly, they are more likely to do more with that data. And that applies also to the media and in general to all data users. Last year, through an ongoing collaboration with the News Agency of Nigeria and Code for Africa, we provided 2 training sessions in Abuja and Lagos to over 50 journalists. Every now and then, I also have a media briefing when we are releasing certain key data, just so that we can tell the media what the data is about and we can take their questions so that in the reporting of that data, they get the right facts and they don't mislead the Nigerian public. So these are the ways we at the NBS are trying to interact with the media and the general public to ensure that data is well produced, is well disseminated, and is well understood by the Nigerian public for the benefit of national development. Also, our website is filled with a lot of data with relevant visualization tools to enhance the quality of report writing. 6-7 years ago, about 8 years ago, we had only about 3,000-4,000 downloads a year of our reports. Today, we're having over 1 million, 2 million downloads of MBS report. So clearly there's an increase in the use and interest in data, and people are definitely more interested in using data to improve their businesses and in holding their elected officials accountable and in monitoring the pace of national development in the country. I want to conclude by saying that I hope I have sketched out the landscape for data production and addressed the strengths, challenges, and opportunities within the system as I was supposed to. I want to also say that I've always said this, that if we do the right things at the right time for the right reasons, our country can be significantly developed. And one of those right things that we have to do at the right time for the right reasons is getting our statistical system and our data right. Thank you very much once again for allowing me to make this make these points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kale. Very, very, very impressive numbers of citizens who are now accessing data from your office. And I'm very sure I have a question around that, not just for you, but also for civil society and on how citizens can then use that knowledge, like you said, to hold their leaders accountable. But before we come to the question section, we're now going to hear from Mr. Manir Dan Ali, who's a veteran reporter and former executive director and editor-in-chief at Daily Trust, and he's a board member of the Media Trust Limited, to share his experience with accessing and using data from a media point of view. Mr. Dan Ali, over to you, sir. Please unmute your mic, sir.
I got carried away. Yes, good day to everyone, wherever you may be joining this. Thanks, Chioma, for the opportunity, and thanks to Motunrayo and the team at the Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism. I've been asked to dwell on three key areas, which is the first, media experience in accessing data, problems of or with data journalism in Nigeria, and then where media and others can do better. I'm glad that Dr. Yemisi and Dr. Kale came before me, because they have sketched out the situation from both the theoretical and the empirical, what is on the ground in Nigeria regarding data. So I will not have to waste time over that aspect of the issue. But I must say that yes, there's been tremendous improvement in terms of the work of especially the NBS under Dr. Kale, so which has helped to begin to come to grips with the government's own data generation and aggregation machinery, but it's still far from perfect. There have been a lot of improvements, but you find that it is not yet uhuru, as some people will say. But that doesn't mean that we should belittle the great work that they've been able to do over the last few years, especially under his leadership. For the media, I think there is still a big problem in terms of accessing data, especially relevant data to do with government, because as you know, the role of media is to hold people in power to account. And by its very nature, government and organizations are usually secretive. They would rather not want to let you know all that is going on. So except if something happens, that is when you begin to hear some of the details that have been kept in cupboards, under the carpets and what have you. And I will give you examples. Since I was editor-in-chief, I know at the Daily Trust, we've been trying to get one of the most secretive government offices in Nigeria, that is the Ecological Fund, to give us details of all that they had been doing, all the money they've been receiving. You see, this is a special fund. set up to be automatically getting certain amount of money of Nigeria into the fund, and then to be supposedly applying it to ecological matters. But so many times under different presidents, from Obasanjo to even before him, that fund has been abused. So you find that actually at one time, I think it must be the embassy in Japan that was giving some billions to be able to buy an embassy building for Nigeria in Tokyo. So, you can't imagine. Yes, I know last week or this week, there's problem of ecology in Japan, but it has got nothing to do with Nigeria. The flooding that they are experiencing. So for such a long time, we've been trying to get this office to give us that information. It hasn't. I don't know whether that information is readily available at the collating center that the MBS is now. But I know that we tried, and at one time, the head of the organization arranged for a meeting to try to show the sensitivity and all of this and all of that of the information. Another time, we wrote to NNPC seeking for certain information, some data. We never got it. All we got was a letter from their advisor, their legal advisor, who said, look, they are under the Freedom of Information Act. We shouldn't be asking for that because it's some sensitive economic information. And then, of course, the other thing about the data is accuracy. I don't think we are yet past the date when the data of central bank and the NNPC do not agree, or the data of the NETI and the NNPC agrees. So there's still work in progress. There's a lot of work. So because data is not necessary, it's not the holy grail if it is not reliable. If it is not reliable, there is a big problem. So for the media, I will say that it's not even just the issue of reliability, but the issue of availability of the relevant data that they are looking for. The relevant data that will help the media to tell the story of Nigeria, of whether our public officials are holding the public trust given to them, of whether, for example, what the drama that is currently happening regarding the EFCC. Until now, we didn't know. And for all the years of Ibrahim Magu as acting head of the EFCC, columnists, including one of ours, have been writing and please present the audited report of your agency, which your act says you should do. And it hasn't been presented for all the years that he's been there. And it's now that they are trying to use it as an maybe excuse to hang him also. But what I'm saying is that a lot of the relevant data is still not available, and especially in a timely manner, because if the act of an organization says do this, I thought that should be done. Why is it that just yesterday, to give you an example, I was reading a story from an online medium, one of the credible online medium in Nigeria, actually it's Premium Times. They did a story about the fact that Nigeria is the third highest importer of maize, even in 2019. But if you ask the government, they are likely to tell you that no maize has been imported, because there was a lot of hue and cry when farmers who have been encouraged in Nigeria to grow more maize and soybean and others that are said to be in high demand, especially by the poultry industry, found that government allowed for the importation when given the necessary encouragement. And it doesn't mean giving money. It doesn't mean handing over 20,000 or whatever to farmers. No, just making fertilizer available at the time it is needed. Like this year, you find that there is some bureaucratic problem that has made the fertilizer not to be available as say last year at the price that it was of last year. And it's simply because of some cock up in government. And the media will try to report these things, and then it wants some data. And you can see from the example I've just given you of just a story yesterday night, if you check, you will see it there. the Premium Times had to rely on data from US Agriculture Department to be able to establish that fact, that actually Nigeria is the third highest importer of maize from the US in 2018 and 2019. In 2019, I think it was either Zimbabwe that imported up to 1 million metric ton, and other figure for Kenya, then Nigeria tons. And meanwhile, we are saying we want to keep the jobs here. Why are we, exporting our jobs to American farmers? Our farmers, and when we know that, agriculture is one area that will suck up huge numbers of employment because of its nature. And I'm not talking of agriculture of horse and cutlasses. I'm talking of even the agriculture of tractors, the agriculture of smarter use of drones to deliver whether it's fertilizer or chemical or something that is needed on the farm. So I think we need to be, the data should be available here in Nigeria. The relevant, I believe, and I can imagine the battle that Dr. Kale has with other government organs regarding giving him the necessary data to be able to have all the bigger national picture about things. So it's far from the situation that we hope that it should, because I've just given you practical examples of the situation we are faced with. Of course, there are problems with data because there are problems of the accuracy, whether it is accurate, whether it is up to date, whether it is even presented in a way that is possible for journalists to be able to interpret it quickly. I know on the journalist part, they ought to specialize. We ought to specialize some more to be able to pour over huge numbers, crunch them and make sense out of them. Daily Trust is one of those that are trying to do that. They do a number of stories that are largely data-based, and they also try to simplify and present them in a way that, an ordinary Joe can follow. But there are problems because you find that, like the example I just gave, not many government organizations are eager or are happy to release information, data that in their own reasoning could be used against them. So that is why you find that all you have is the rofo fight that you end up having on the floor of the National Assembly between Mr. Keyamo, the Minister of State of Labor, and the National Assembly, who he accused of already taking 15% of the 774,000 temporary jobs. And mind you, because we are not even asking questions, initially when they are talking about those jobs, I thought it's some regular jobs that will be there for a while. But when you just examine, they are talking of just paying 20,000 for 3 months to people to go and do this public works and what have you. And just yesterday, I was seeing a video of a governor who said, look, I won't give local government chairmen money to take casual money, which I know they will just divide between themselves and their cronies and no work gets done. So you find that except when there's a disagreement, that is when you begin to have a peak of the rot that is in there, of all the things that people in government would rather are kept out of the public domain. So we need to do much more. We need to make the data itself more accurate and reliable. And I will give you an example. This one has to do with the media. There's a media report that tells you the spread of media across the country. It's done by a body and it's an annual thing. But the shocking thing you find, in spite of what Mr. Kale was saying, that a governor may disagree with page 2 of his report and then agree with page 5. Yes, it's something similar even in that media report. But I thought that the fundamental basis of any data should be its accuracy and for it to be reliable. Daily Trust, for example, is said to be a regional paper. I mean, that's what, because unless you start producing in Lagos, you are not seen as a national newspaper. Even though the Daily Trust has a printing press in Lagos, has a production center in Lagos. It's one of the few that has 4 different production centers spread across the country. But you see that report, even in the north, it was listing papers, newspapers that have not been in existence for the last 5 years, that they are ahead of Daily Trust in terms of their reach, in terms of copies being available. So you see, I mean, even if we want to like make that report to smell of roses, there's no way we can agree of something which, if there are maybe researchers have left the comfort of their office in Lagos or wherever and gone to, whether it is Benue State or Plateau State or Niger State or Kwara State or any of those states in the North Central, they will have seen what obtains in the ground. They will even have found out that some of the papers they are listing to be ahead of the Daily Trust have since packed up. So why are they there? So this is part of the problem of the data. Unless you have a very well motivated workforce that works for you in the different arms of government that are collecting this data, and you are doing all the checks beyond what just the head of the organization can do, because it's just human sitting on his desk. But you have a system of checks and balances that ensures that that data is truly up to scratch. It can stand up to any scrutiny. So unless you do that, honestly, the data is not so good. Yes, it is better to still have something that is not perfect, but we need to keep improving, because it is almost of little use if it is so imperfect. Well, the problem is not just with government. It's even this recent example I've just given, but even the media itself, because the media, you know, there's almost a situation of PR, public relations, has captured journalism in Nigeria. You know, in South Africa, they are talking of state capture by the Gupta brothers, some businessmen who like were dictating and getting all the businesses, cornering all the big contracts, all the important things under the former President Zuma. But in Nigeria also, there is something we are not talking about or watching very carefully. The capture of the media by PR machineries of government, of big companies, and what have you. So because of that, you find that it has made a lot of journalists actually lazy. They are not doing some of the hard stuff, and then they are not poring over even the available reports. Because I'll give you an example. Every year, the budget process gets done, and it's an opportunity where you get some numbers. By the time the budget gets approved and then the president signs it and all of that, it becomes a law. And you find that some newspapers we are barely scratching the surface. That is the media organizations, because you see mostly it's about stories that there is 10 billion for food in the villa. But we are not even looking at some of the outrageous things in so many ministries. And then some of the repetitive things that if you check the budget of the last 10 years, you see the same ministry is making the same claim. Like, for example, you know, the popular one that they like is, say, IT, because a lot of people until now, there's increasing understanding about IT. But in the last decade or so, you find that that is where you hide the bodies. You just say, okay, IT, and you have a lot of millions, and then you claim you have bought computers, you have done some local area networking, maybe some bandwidth and what have you. But in reality, very little has happened. And as in most cases, you see reports of the same organizations who have voted all these millions annually, their websites are not functioning. I mean, which is the most basic thing about IT, to have a very functional, responsive website. I can imagine the frustration of a lot of people who are sitting out of Nigeria, who wants to get information about Nigeria, and they go to our official government sites, and all they see are photos of the chief executives and information about the chief executives, and not a lot of information that they can use, because some people think it's still state secrets. You know, it's the joke, the popular joke we do with, I mean, in media cycle is that when the military people invite you, even for their own press briefing, you see that on the paper of the invitation, under it you see restricted, because that's there in their mindset, in their psyche. Everything should not be, it's like state secret. It shouldn't be released. People should not be allowed to know. So even when they're inviting you to a press briefing, press conference, it is restricted. It's not, I mean, you want the world, you want to flash it across the world so that more people come to that event. So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of work that the journalists ought to do themselves, so that even the information that is like reluctantly allowed to come to the public domain, like the budget and what have you, if somebody sits and really takes his time, because it's, you know, very painstaking work. You need to sit sometimes for even months poring over something, but then as it happens elsewhere, it is the kind of story when you do, it wins you big prizes, like the Pulitzer in, say, America, or whatever is the equivalent in other countries. So our own journalists need to specialize so that they are not bamboozled, and then they are not victims of the all is well narrative of the PR machinery of government, of companies, and what have you. I mean, last week I saw a story about 7 or so people dying in some NNPC location. I mean, I have covered the oil industry when I was a reporter, and I'm not sure there has been this kind of incidents in a long time. But all the reports were just quoting the press release of the NNPC. Nobody probed any further, and no even comparative going back to history to say, okay, is this new? What is the context and all of that? So again, it's showing you the state, I mean, the capture of journalism by the PR machineries of both the government and the big companies. I mean, some of them even do underhand this, that, okay, if you are doing what they consider negative stories, you don't get their adverts. You don't get their advertisement. And you know, the advertisement is the oxygen of the media, because that is what is used to pay the salaries and all the other expenses of media houses, both online and offline. So journalists themselves have to specialize, because you see, boring data will not be easily digested by people who like consume information and news. It needs to be visualized. I'm glad that the co-founder of Budget will be speaking after me. I believe one of the things they have done is the occasional intervention they do about visualizing some of the data about all sorts of information that they come across, which they think is very important, because visualizing it makes it to hit you so that you understand it much better than when it is just the numbers and what have you. So I should begin to round up by saying that—
Mr. Ali?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to mention that there's quite a few questions and comments that have come up for you in the chat section. And I think you've raised a really super point on capture, which, you know, is a conversation that we continue to have. There's also the question around, you know, advertising being the sole source of funding for media organizations. And I know that this is one of the questions that the MacArthur Foundation is constantly trying to answer around media sustainability and how the media is able to stand independent of these pipers, as it were, who then dictate what kind of news that they put out. And so I'm sure that there's an opportunity for a really robust conversation around that as soon as we hear from our last speaker for today, Mr. Olusegun Onibinde, who is the co-founder and director of Budget Foundation. He will be speaking to us about, civil society engagement on data. And I'm sure that we really want to hear what he has to say. Mr. Shehu, you have exactly 10 minutes. And as soon as that's done, we'll come back for all the questions and comments that are currently filling up our chat room. Thank you very much, Mr. Shehu.
Chioma, thank you very much, Chioma. You call me Mr. Shehu, and I guess it's because we're in this formal forum. That's why you choose to call me Mr. Shehu. I will take it. Secondly, you say exactly 10 minutes. Now, you put the word exact for me, so I will try as much as possible to stay within that. I guess that's one of the, let me say, the fortune of speaking last. Thank you very much. I have a small presentation. I will share my screen and I will just speak through it. I'll see if I can finish in 10 minutes, and then we'll be able to view it all. I'm going to speak about realities of access to data. I'm going to bring it from a civil society perspective. And I will try, and I know that a lot of this has been said in bits and pieces, so I will try and just bring it home. One thing I noticed is that I'm writing a book, which should be up possibly by October, and I'm trying to look at 60 years of Nigerians at independence, and what exactly where do we go from here? And I've been trying, because of my background, because of the work I do, I've been trying to ensure that it's data-driven as possible, with visualizations, with charts, so that it can connect with many more people. But one thing I've noticed and I've found out is that there's no problem that Nigeria has currently that doesn't come down to data. I mean, it all comes down to data. You're trying to have issues on insecurity, you're talking about poverty, you're talking about health, talking about unemployment or housing or education or power. It all comes down to data. And that's the missing point for Nigeria, as a baseline for everything, if we are all being honest. Just yesterday, something happened in the UK. A young boy on social media using an anonymous handle on Instagram was tweeting or sending racist message to a Premier League player, Wilfred Zaha. And within 2 hours, they were able to apprehend that it was a 12-year-old boy that lived in a neighborhood in West Midlands in the UK, just because they have a robust database of people. One of the things that we have not done well, which I'm going to bring it to in the next slide, is that we have not done great work on how do we profile things around Nigerians. And it's because, one, we have an aversion to facts. We don't like facts in Nigeria. We constantly continue to move on in this whole managing the Nigerian equation and managing the Nigerian society. So we don't want to face some bold truths about the current situation of Nigeria. Second thing is we're also wrestling with the truth. We know that facts is going to create some undeniable truths in the Nigerian space. So because of that, you see a poor data culture around Nigeria. And with great respect with what the MBS has done, and I'm going to come back to the MBS itself, but this is not just solely about the MBS. This is even the ones that MBS, the ones they have done, the ones they have produced, are we able to stitch up to narratives? Are we able to build access to conversation? So all problems of Nigeria, we may talk about the corruption attitudes of its players, we will look at all the other issues around the poor ethical culture within our public service, but at the end of the day, we are working without data, we are planning without facts. And from budget, we look at data from a 4-way test. One, actionable. Is this data useful? Is it data useful? And I think I made an error here, but I will correct that in absence speed. The first thing is actionable. I mean, we can talk about data coming up in gross summaries, and gross summaries, meaning that we just all pipe them to say, this is data from the top line, and we have released the data. But what's the sense in that data? You say construction of roads, and Lagos State does this well a lot. Construction of roads, 400 billion naira. Like, which roads, which area? at what cost, for which people. So when data does not get that granular, it does not become actionable. It does not become even useful. Second thing is timely. It has to be timely. I mean, for us, look at the board member, Mr. Dan Ali said, timeliness of data. Look at EFCC has not published its audited report for 4 years. And I know there are organizations like the Daily Trust, the PLSI, Premium Times Budget have raised these concerns that we can't say we are fighting corruption. And the number of organizations or public institutions publishing audited statements keeps reducing on a year-on-year basis. And that's what it means that you are able to think through about the timeliness of data and making it more comprehensive. And finally, it has to be accurate. Yes, 2 days or 3 days ago, there was some data that was presented about Nigeria's finances from January to May. And somehow, this is just basic addition from budget. Recurrent expenditure from statutory transfers plus your capital expenditure is supposed to make up your entire total expenditure. Then we added all of that up. Then we find out there's still a 400 billion naira gap in terms of what constitutes the actual expenditure of government, and no questions around that. So it has to be accurate, which means constant peer reviews that we're checking from government or even from the civil society or the media itself. Now, when we look about data, I ask myself, where are we missing the point as a country, and where can we have realities of developed systems? One is we do so poorly. I mean, so our approach to data in terms of identity in Nigeria is so poor. And in identity, even in protecting that identity, because I know, I mean, I've had like 2 or 3 people have approached me to say, we have database of those who have done NYC in Nigeria, and now we are willing to sell it to you. And I hear that all the time in Abuja. Someone has captured maybe an Empower data, someone has captured data at a large scale and is able to just even trade out for a fee. But there's even a bigger problem. We don't even know who is a Nigerian. A lot of Nigerians don't even have identity. They don't have a national identity. They don't have a passport. They don't have any single reference data that you can say this qualifies them to be able to present themselves as a Nigerian. They might be Nigerians defined by the Constitution, but where exactly is the evidence of that? And without that, you can't even effectively plan. And so you can see all the programs that we do. We try and go above this question. So we're trying to give palliatives to people we don't even know which people are poor. We don't even know the poorest of the poor. We don't even know the most vulnerable in the environment or even in system. So we just walk into a community, we talk to a few people, we do our analysis, and we say, these are poor Nigerians, or these are the poorest of the poor Nigerians, and we're giving palliatives to them. During this COVID-19, there have been 3 or 4 segments of society that have been seriously affected. Number one, primary school teachers. Private primary school teachers, most of those schools are closed. Most of the people that work in there have not been paid. There has been no conversation or no clear-cut data to the government that this category of people deserve to earn some palliative. Piggery farmers. My uncle runs a piggery, and there's been a large epidemic around called the swine flu, and it's affected the whole of these enterprises. No one has asked questions to say, how do we provide palliatives and support to these people? Just because we don't have identity about who does what, or where do they live, or what currently their status, or even if we don't even organize ourselves around a proper social contract. Secondly, social economic data. We might do well in this, but still not enough. Development data, MBS does great work. Large part of that is outsourced to global spaces. Most times we don't even have the technical expertise to even run a lot of this data. So you are left with extrapolations that have been running maybe even from 1960s, and they will say, oh, Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, or even has this size of maternal mortality ratio, of infant mortality ratios. Whereas because we have just not done the right work to even improve this data, then resource data. The thing about it is that I bring this back to budget, is you look at the data. If I take budget as an example, you look at budgets, procurement, spending, audits, and service evaluation, which is like the fiscal data pipeline chain. And what you are going to see is that you have the budget is still, a whole of data comes from NAPWE, The procurement data is small. The spending data has been better due to the open treasury, but that's so disconnected, that's so disorganized. There are tons of issues, and between budget, data fight, procurement, PPDC, we have been working around that area recently. Then audit, then you have service evaluation. Then it comes to you about, even when you have all of that, there are issues with the funding of the Bureau of Statistics. So for example, I pulled up this data yesterday. Budget for the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics is around 5.5 billion. The whole capital budget that the federal government invests for MBS is 94 million naira. I mean, and this is just the budget. You have not even looked at the actual spending or the actual disbursement for that. Because in this, even in this, as at May, the federal government has only disbursed around 253 billion out of over, they have only even done 10%. In 5 months of the year, they've done 10%, around 10% of the total capital expenditure for the country. So I don't even know, maybe Mr. Yemi Kale will tell us, or Dr. Yemi Kale will tell us, but we are not even funding our National Bureau of Statistics. And I'll ping this back to 4 main issues. I mean, as I try to make sure that I keep the 10 minutes mark. One is a single reference element. So I go back to this test, 4-way test for this platform, for our own work. The data sets that you see here are not connected. So even as budgets, when a road is developed, or when the school is delivered, or when anything is done, I can't trace back that item easily back to the budget. I can't say, okay, this item has a single reference, and the budget has a single reference. Yes, the budget has a single reference. So why is that single reference not going through the same thing on the procurement side? And I check maybe the open treasury platform, and I see that single reference, and I see that same single reference when the Auditor General does his work, and I see that single reference even in the documentation for the service delivery. So the problem is that the data sets are disconnected, are disjointed. So you can't plug the holes. You can't be able to connect the dots together, which brings to my second point about we need to, there's nobody connecting the dots, and not just connecting the dots from a data level, connecting the dots on the policy level, connecting the dots on a narrative level. For example, why do we look at the data sets of Nigeria and we see that, and we've been studying this in budget for a while, that the quality of girl-child education is clearly linked to the quality of life in an environment. It's very simple that when girls get delayed marriages, they're able to make much more choices about the number of children they have. They're able to even wait a bit to even have the normal economic capacity so that they can also become active participants within the environment. Nobody tries to connect the dots to say, hey, we might be having a population explosion here. We may have a declining GDP per capita here. There's a need to plug the gap by investing heavily on this side so that this has the impact on maternal mortality, infant mortality, poverty, and the way you'll be able to build the data set and connect the dots on policy level, we don't do that in Nigeria. Even so, when the data sets are so glaring to us, we don't do it. The second example will be the issue of oil prices. Since 1973, anytime oil prices are high, you find out that Nigeria is enjoying robust growth. The exchange rate is much more stable. When oil prices go down, maybe in 1981, or you have it in 1986, or you have it maybe in 2009, or you have possibly even what you have already in 2020 now, you find out that Nigeria currency just loses value and declines. Just because you have a single product tied into your export market. So you don't have a diversified export base. So why don't we ask the question, we want to have a stable currency in the next 5 to 10 years. The big question that should be on our minds is, how do we diversify Nigeria's export so that we don't have a single element that is giving us all this vulnerability? So we're not even connecting the dots at the possible level, because we can talk about data, but it needs to mean something. Thirdly is the feedback system, something that Mr. Dan Ali spoke about. Also, the Dr. Araba spoke about. You make the conversations. You say there's a gap here. There are holes here. For example, what we have seen on the open treasury platforms, there are thousands of payments without descriptions, without any form of conversation. Nobody even understands how does someone in a ministry or someone in an agency get 2 billion naira in the space of 3 months. Are they paying the salary of the entire ministry to his pocket because he can't even reconcile that with the budget of the ministry? No one, and we've written to the Auditor General and the Accountant General, we have made a copy to the Minister of Finance, not a single word on that basis. So even the media is going to raise this alarm and is going to raise these questions. Nobody's even trying to connect the dots. How do we even engage the intermediaries and build some form of improved systems? And that comes about where we need to do more work in feedback systems and building synergies between the producers and the users. I'll put this as the last slide for media and civil society. We need to do more work in embedding data systems in newsrooms. Mr. Dan Ali has said a lot about how we have not paid attention into the capacity of newsroom, and a lot of them they are engineered now to just do PR and advertising. But it's not supposed to be. We can see how the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, there's a lot of emphasis of data. Almost every single report, there's a visualization, there's a data analytic backbone to that, just because they invest in that. But I know that's challenging. We don't run on the same budget, but something that has to be intentional and can be very much more incremental. And how do we build the technology space, the visualization space into the media? And I know Daily Trust does a lot of work in this with the foresight of Mr. Dan Ali. I've been following that for years. Partnership in application of gaps and users. So we can't run alone on this. We need to work together as media and civil society to amplify the gaps and the uses, and to be able to make sure that there are actionable changes. Thirdly is building broad coalition with new resources of power, faith organization, grassroots media. The data must mean much more. It must build conversation. It must change the behavior of public office. Thirdly, synergy within producers and users. I spoke about that already. And finally, visualization, much more work on storytelling, because data is great, but the stories are greater. We can't just stay on the position of data. We must be able to connect this to the lives, to the aspirations, to the issues that really affect people on the ground. And I want to thank all the people, everyone that's been doing a lot of work. I mean, I wanted to put more work here, but I know Data Fight has been, it's a young organization, but they've been doing incredible work in terms of the liberation of data, and even Budget is planning to work with them as soon as possible. Budget, Daily Trust, Code for Africa, Mobile Punch, and different organizations that have worked on this. My own final thought is just that we need to be a country that wants honesty. And if we want honesty, the only way we are going to be honest is to accept the cruel or the truth that emanates from data. And when we are able to accept that, we can now ask ourselves, what do we need to improve? What do we need to change? A society that really wants to progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sheung. Insisting on my Mr. Sheung for the purposes of this conversation. Thank you so much for the points that you raised. As a member of civil society, or as someone who has, straddled civil society and media in the course of my career, I think the points that you raised really jumped out at me, and just kind of like, these are the conversations that we should be having. And earlier in this meeting, I saw you and Yemi having a conversation around how do we kind of just visualize the problems that we have, or the things that we need, alongside the things that we currently have, and put out these pictures very clearly to our leaders. So I'm going to get us started. There are tons and tons of questions in the chat room. Thank you, a big thank you to all of our presenters, a big thank you to everyone who's in on this conversation. Also to mention that there's over 100 of us now within this lecture, which is great. We have excellent retention numbers for this conversation, and I'm sure that we will really justify the time that everyone's spending with us today. I'm going to ask each of the panelists one question, and then we will then kick off with the response. As you kick off with your responses, we'll take questions from the rest of the audience. My first question goes to Dr. Alaba. And you talked about integrity of the data, right? As one of the characteristics, you talked about integrity. So my question for you is, how do we balance the acceptance of data in Nigeria, considering the sensitivities around politics, for instance, around the distribution of resources, etc.? And for Dr. Kale, you talked about one of the weaknesses you identified with our data you talked about budgeting and the fact that we have one of the lowest budgets for data on the continent. Who funds our data collection, and how does the MBS navigate the piper dictating the tune scenario? So let's take responses to both questions, and then we will come back to the rest of the audience. Oh, Dr. Kale has had to drop out. Thank you very much for sharing that information really quickly. Dr. Yamisi will take your question, and then we'll go to the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, the moderator. Like I said during my presentation, that to have a sustainable framework in Nigeria for development, that the 4 components of the National Statistical System need to work together. And like you said data integrity. You know, to have a sustainable framework, there is need for coordination at all levels, whether at the local government level, the state ministry, departments and agency, and so on. So you find that there are times we have situations where MBS will publish a result, will give us figures maybe on mortality rates. The state government will come up with another figure, and there will be discrepancies. And that is why we are talking that MBS, as the National Statistical Office, should be able to coordinate all the activities at the grassroots level. Then onwards transmission to the State Bureau of Statistics, so that when there is a figure, nobody can dispute it. But when you have the state government coming with a figure and another state government and another agency coming with another figure, you know, there is a problem and people are thrown into confusion. And that is why the National Bureau of Statistics, which is our National Statistical Office, should be up and doing to give us credible data that we can be sure that it originates from our National Statistical Office. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. Thank you very much. So we're just going to go very quickly into the comment section, and I'm going to run through a number of questions that we have received. There's a question from Mr. Dan Ali. From Taiwo Samuel. He says, you talked about government organizations bringing a letter from their lawyers, but doesn't the Nigerian Constitution provide for freedom of mass media in Section 22 of the of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended? Or are you saying governments can use veto powers over everything? I'll please ask the panelists to note the questions as I take them, and then you'll just give responses. So that's one question for Mr. Dan. Another question from Mr. Dan says, you talked about the need for investigative journalism and ending the over-reliance on the PR of companies and MDAs, but considering the current state of the nation and the incessant attacks on the lives of journalists, how can this be achieved? That's a really interesting question, and one that I can align with. There's a question on date. I'm going to leave the questions for Dr. Kale since he's had to step out. And then on accuracy and data reporting, on data gathering, there's a question from Anne Godwin. Sometimes a reporter gets frustrated due to the high level of secrecy in our system today when government officials find it difficult to divulge information required to balance reports. How do we tackle this challenge? I'll be looking to Mr. Dan also to respond to this question. Sean's point on our aversion for data and resistance to truth is very salient. Thank you, Sean. This is from Ngozi Iwere. How do we address this attitude? Do we take responses to those questions? I think there are 3 questions for Mr. Dan. There's 1 question for Sean, Mr. Sean, and then we'll take the rest of them. Mr. Dan, over to you.
Okay, thank you, but I didn't get the 3rd question very clearly. I don't know whether you could.
So maybe just take these 2. Just take these 2, and we'll go back for the rest.
Yes, the first one from Taiwo talking about whether the guarantee in the Constitution for the journalists to do their work is enough. But as you know, I mean, the law is one thing, the practice is another, all over the world. But in Nigeria particularly, you will find that government officials like pay lip service to what the Constitution says. That is why we are actually in the quandary that we are. I've just given you the example of the EFCC Act, which has very clearly stated section on declaring, providing audited account annually to the National Assembly. It hasn't been done, nothing has happened. And it's like that on everything. Even though the Constitution guarantees that the media is supposed to hold people to account as the so-called fourth estate of the realm, but you find that government people are never happy with that. Remember what happened in Ebonyi just a few months ago, where the governor made a broadcast, and in that broadcast he was excommunicating a journalist. He was saying that the journalist cannot function in his state. It was only the very powerful reaction that he got, very negative to the position he's taken, that made him to do a climb down and now say something else. That's okay, he didn't really mean it. So, it's one thing that the law says so, but the observance of the law actually in many instances is not perfect. The balance between safety of journalists and investigative reporting. I will say that in Nigeria, there isn't, it's not to the extent that you have in other countries. Look at what's happening in, say, Mexico. Just yesterday, I saw a story about some editor who was doing a story about, in Mexico, they have, and in much of Latin America, there are instances of the disappeared. That's somebody will just come, pick somebody, and then that's it. Though in Nigeria, there is currently one case, there's somebody called Dadiata, is a commentator on social media based in Kaduna. He's disappeared for the last 1 year. Nobody has seen him, and nobody knows whether he's alive or dead. His wife was just 2 days ago saying that she's still prayerful. She's still hoping that those who have taken him will not, may not have harmed him and he will come back alive, because his 2 daughters, 7 years, 2 years, keep asking about their dad. So, but this risk comes with the territory. And I think if we are doing the right thing and you are observing the necessary safety protocol, it's not like in every instance you will get killed, like that Mexican journalist that I was just in the middle of giving the example before I jumped to something else. Because in his own case, following that story, he got killed. Because in Mexico, there is a strong drug cartel that decides things. So, and almost decides on life and death. In Nigeria, we haven't reached that extent, but if our media continues to be weak, it is no surprise that we could get there. Sometimes it could be even not the drug people, it could be government people or rogue government people, rogue elements within the government that could do this, as has happened during the military when Bagauda Kalto and a number of journalists have disappeared in some instances without trace.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dan Ali. Thank you so much for your responses to those questions. My next set of questions go to Mr. Sheon, and they are primarily around, civil society, but also citizen engagement and citizen action. And the first one is, how do we, looking at the increase in the number of downloads of MBS data, get citizens to take this knowledge? So, Budget does a lot of visualization. How do we get citizens to not just download this data and have this data, but how do we get them to take action based on this? That's number one. Number two is, how can journalists get data from government agencies, even though the FOI Act exists and they still have a lot of challenges? How can civil society organizations help? Or what lessons can be learned from civil society organizations? And for Dr. Alaba, I have 2 questions for you, which you can take right after Mr. Sheon responds to his. How much has the MBS met your needs as an academic? That's your first question. How much has the MBS met your needs as an academic? And the second one is, how come the NBS and the National Statistical Office do not agree on the same data? How come the NBS and the National Statistical Office do not agree on the same data? I have a third one, which I'm just going to throw in, which is still for Dr. Alaba, and it says, does the NBS have a platform for researchers to notify them of their research results that might be of importance to national development? I'll take that again. Does the NBS have a platform for researchers to notify them of research results that might be of great importance to national development? So over to you, Sheon, for your questions, and then we'll come to Dr. Alaba to give responses to hers. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ms. Choma. So I would start first about aversion to data and wrestling with or resistance to the truth. That was the first question. And I would say that, how do we change that? We have to keep knocking it. We have to be persistent. There's nothing that will be given on the platter of gold. And that's the way I see that. And we need much more actors. We need more coordinated voices of the actors. For example, like the current travails of the EFCC chairman now, there have been conversations between budget, CISLAC, even including, I think, CDD, around there should be a structured framework around recovered assets or recovered loot in Nigeria. There's a bill in the National Assembly called POCA, Proceeds of Crime, Use of Crime Assets, but nobody has even been able to even push that forward. So you leave a lot of things to discretion. So the way I see things is that we need to do more work around coordination. It can't just be budget, it can't just be CISLAC. And something which Mr. Innocent Chukuma has been hammering on recently about how civil society needs to find a coordinated voice on issues. Just because we work in different thematic silos does not mean we cannot come together and articulate on issues. And we just have to knock. And knocking that door means that knock that through media, also knock that through our friends in government. So no matter how bad it is, we still have a few people we could still reach out to and be using those pipelines and those engagements to be able to make those issues come forward. Because that's the only way that I know that even for people without the authority of the state, like the civil society or the media, can do much more work. Secondly, is about there's a question around downloads. How does downloads translate to action? Great that there's, I mean, the first point is that there are downloads. But the next question is that we still need to do a much more work around packaging a level of this content and do a whole lot more work on personalization to be able to build engagement with citizens. The challenge that we have in Nigeria is also around issues of literacy and poverty when it comes even around the mass of people that the masses of the people that we're trying to engage. And so if you're not building clear-cut data points that really affect their lifestyle. I mean, you talk to someone around, maternal mortality, infant mortality. I mean, is that the conversation one takes to the grassroots? Yes, we can take that conversation to the grassroots, but it has to be built in a way that is personal, that really affects them, that they see their own self-interest. They see it in that kind of story, and it's the only thing that can activate them to ask questions. We also must be able to show them the clear route to accountability, which means that it doesn't mean that we give them this data alone. This should be your ward chairman, your party ward chairman. You know these people. Your member on House of Rep or your member, your representative in the Senate. You meet these people. Let this be part of your question. Now, why do we have this primary healthcare center with XYZ without this equipment? And what do we do to change all of those stories? I mean, those are the kind of things that we need to do. Much more work in personalization and simplification, and much more work on storytelling, and also showing a clear route of accountability. Final point is journalists. How do we get much more data from government, and what can we do with the civil society? Now, there is the Freedom of Information Act, but I always take that as the final weapon in terms of accessing data. The primary thing is that data should be proactively disclosed. And even the Freedom of Information Act even speaks about this, that not every single time do we have to write letter to every member of every public servant. This data should be public in there. And what we need to do much more is constantly demand. I mean, demand in multiples. That look at this, 4, 5, 6, and I know Budget, PPDC, Basic Rights Watch, and I think another organization all work around requesting the same data set from the same public institution. I have like 2 or 3 people that reached out to me. I think it was NEITI, Waziria DO, and Shegwaulo of any NIPCC. Actually, your people are requesting, 3 or 4 organizations are requesting data from me. Are you sure everything is okay with me? I mean, is it someone's trying to target me? But it's very important that we also go in that way and to show people that there's a huge level of public interest in this data. And the best way to stop this incessant demand is to put it proactively there and put it on your website. And that makes that citizens are able to access. So at the end of the day, the answers I have is that we need much more work in coordinated and unrelenting demand. Thank you very much.
Dr. Alaba?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. The first question is, how much has MBS met my needs as a researcher? Well, to answer this, I cannot say in a yes/no form, but I want to, let's use like a comparative analysis. Where was MBS? Where is MBS now? For example, 2 notable activities that they are of interest to me. The first one is the open data calendar release, and the second one is open data for Africa. You know when and what type of data you are expecting. And the open data for Africa is a link to so many things happening in the country. But as a researcher, like whenever I'm using the World Bank data, the World Bank data is a pool where I can get query-driven data. And apart from that, I can always get, apart from query-driven data, it is in an analytic-ready form. But MBS oftentimes provides data in form of PDF, where you have to write out the data, and by the time you are trying to copy, definitely you can run into error. So that is why I wouldn't say that MBS is not performing, but there is room for improvement. Then the second question is, how come NBS and is it maybe the person wanted to ask MBS and SBS or MDA do not agree on same data? I want to say there is low level of coordination. If MBS, though MBS is using the decentralized act, but there should still be involvement with other agencies so that all these agencies, they are well linked to our National Statistical Office, which is National Bureau of Statistics. Then the third one is, does MBS have a platform to notify them of national development? Well, I'm not aware, but I'm sure of the Demographic Health Survey. The Demographic Health Survey has a portal where you can submit your research outputs. But for MBS, I'm not aware. And I think Dr. Kale can work on this so that we can have a pool where we can submit our research outputs from time to time. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really excited with the quality of conversations that we've had here today. I'd like to say a very big thank you to our panelists, Dr. Oluwayemisi Alaba, who's a senior lecturer of statistics department at the University of Ibadan, to Dr. Yemi Kale, Statistician General of the Federation and Chief Executive Officer, Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics, Manir Dan Ali, Board Member, Media Trust Limited, and former Editor-in-Chief and CEO of Daily Trust, and Mr. Oluseun Oniwinde, co-founder and director of Budget Foundation. A big thank you to the 4 of you for sharing your insights and for sharing your experiences and sharing very generously of your knowledge today. Also want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined the conversation. Over 100 of you joined this lecture today, the 12th annual Wole Soyinka lecture. Thank you so much for being our guests today. We've had a lot of conversations, just thinking about data, thinking about policy, thinking about bettering the lives of each and every one of us Nigerians who live in Nigeria, who live outside Nigeria, using data, strengthening our media, So grateful to all of you. Please follow Wole Soyinka Center for Investigative Journalism on social media. Please use the hashtag on social media. Let's keep this conversation going. And a big thank you to everyone who has put forward one comment or the other. Once again, my name is Chioma Agrebo. Thank you so much for a most productive morning. It's now afternoon though, but yes, thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I'm in chains, you're in chains too. Our uniforms and you are uniforms too. I'm a prisoner, you're a prisoner to me, Mr. Jailer. Oh, I have fears, you have fears too. I'll die, but you said will die too. Life is beautiful, don't you think so too, Mr. Jailer? I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let him is without sin be the first to cast a stone, Mr. Jailer. Press all my strategies. You oppress every part of me. What you don't know, you're a victim too, Mr. Jailer. Oh, you don't care about my point of view. If I die, another will work for you. So you treat me like a modern slave, Mr. Jailer. I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let him who is without sin be the first to cast a stone, Mr. Jailer. Mr. Jailer, man. You see, if you walking in the marketplace, down throw stones. Even if you do, you just might hit one of your own. Life is not about your policies all the time, so you better rearrange your philosophies. I'm going to your fellow my data. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let him who is without sin be the first that cast the